This is Primatology Part 3 for Rise of Civilization. So you watched a video about ape language, and here it talks about some of the controversies surrounding it. If you look at the reading Message from Planet of the Apes, you'll get a little bit more information about the impacts of ape communication on science and research. But to give you the history, early on, people tried to teach chimps how to talk like I'm talking to you now. And what we know is that they did not have the physical capability or the anatomy to do human-type language. So in 1966, a husband and wife team called the Gardeners at Central Washington University taught Washoe, a chimp's American Sign Language. And this was very successful, and she was able to create some of her own signs. It was very basic, but this really broke a big barrier. Then in the 1970s, you had Coco. You could do more research on Coco. This was a gorilla. The big thing about Coco was she had a little kitten that a researcher brought in for her to play with. And every night the researcher would take the kitten home, and Coco really almost adopted this kitten as her own child. And one night the kitty was run over by a car, and Coco was signing, what happened to the kitty, and she was able to express that she was very, very sad. Now, this is really breaking a big barrier. And they actually ended up letting Coco pick another kitty to have. So it had kind of a happy ending. But Coco was able to learn 500 signs. So can apes communicate with us? There seems to be good evidence that they can, at least on a basic level. Jane Goodall feels that chimps are very similar to us. Hopefully you'll watch that retrospective that National Geographic put out last year about Jane and working 50 years with the chimps. So I wanted to bring your attention to the primates, especially chimps and some of the monkeys, in lab experiments. And their similarities to us are their downfall. Now, I will be perfectly honest, I'm a big animal fanatic, and so I personally am against testing on animals for our own purposes. But of course, again, if you read that article, Message from Planet of the Apes, it talks about the fact that if research was not done on monkeys for polio, people would still be in iron lungs. But a lot of research that is done has no real merit, and animals are tortured. Primates are being used for medical testing on hepatitis, AIDS, and other diseases. And just so you know, Jane Goodall is aware of this, and her big thing is, okay, it wouldn't be politically correct to say that you should never test on primates or other animals, but at least keep them in humane conditions instead of sterile cages. They are very social animals, and you don't have to torture them in the lab. How far would you go to protect primates? Here's a picture again of Diane Fossey, who got macheted to death because she was trying to stop the gorillas from being poached. And back at that time period, the reason why they were being poached is because they were using their hands to make ashtrays. That's how bad it was. On the other side of the coin, there are places like the Yerkes Primate Research Institute at Emory University, that does a lot of good work, and here you see a monkey being used for Parkinson's research. But understand that they are vaccinating these diseases into the animals. A lot of chimps were bred in captivity for AIDS research, And then they discovered that, well, they're really not good for AIDS research. So there was a controversy a while back about what Congress should do, and they have agreed to retire, excuse me, retire the chimps rather than euthanize them. So, besides the dilemma of medical testing on the primates, we also have what's called the bushmeat saga. And in parts of Africa where deforestation is occurring, there's not enough for people to eat, so they are slaughtering chimps and gorillas for food. Here's an entire gorilla family that was killed for food. It's a gorilla head in a cooking pot. Here's parts of gorillas being sold for meat. Here's a gorilla's head that's going to be made for soup. And unfortunately, the parents of these chimps were killed for food, and that's also what's going to be the fate of these babies. As you learned, I was in Uganda and Rwanda in 2008 to see the mountain gorillas. It was the result of this particular article in Newsweek. In the Congo, they were killing gorillas not for food, not for animal experimentation, but because the people wanted to get into the protective habitat of the gorillas to cut the trees down for firewood. And because the gorillas eat bamboo and other types of foliage, it was an off-limits place for humans, and to make their point, they killed a bunch of gorillas. So here's a big silverback that was murdered. And so I wanted to see what I could do to help the gorillas. And again, in your lifetime, they probably will be extinct. There's only 700 to 800 left in the world, in that part of Africa. So from everything I could read, they said the best thing to do would be to go there and bring tourist dollars, and that's what I did. So this is just to make you aware of some of the issues facing the primates, extinction, experimentation. Here's the book about the bushmeat saga. It's called Eating Apes, and there is an organization. There's a lot of nonprofits, the Jane Goodall Foundation, the Diane Fossey Foundation, the Gorilla Foundation, Save Chimps Foundation. But this is a real interesting one, the Great Ape Project, which started in New Zealand, where apes are not even indigenous. But basically, they're advocating for basic legal rights, which are the right to life, the protection of individual liberty, and the prohibition of torture. Now, there's a lot of arguments to this. We can't even enforce these rights for humans. And then another side of the coin is, what about dogs? What about cats? What about other animals that we're close to? Should they be given basic human rights as well? So for the Bushmeat Project, they're actually looking for alternatives. And there are a lot of primate sanctuaries that you can donate to or go volunteer at if you have the time or the money. And let's end it on a good note with the bonobos.